Welcome to the Fight Lawyer Podcast, where we discuss combat sports and the law. Our guest today is former Middleweight Champion of the World, Kelly Pavlik. Kelly, thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. Thanks for having me on.
So, growing up in Youngstown, Ohio, what initially led you to boxing?
What brought me into boxing? You know what, man? I was young, obviously, when I started, so it wasn't like I had a great sports career. But I was playing, Pee Wee football, T-ball, Little League baseball, and and I was also into karate. And I was enjoying, watch the movies, everything else. And the karate, I signed up for it, but it just wasn't for me. There wasn't enough contact. It was kind of dull after a while. And my older brother was boxing, and I just wanted to kind of follow his footsteps. And I went to the boxing gym. I got to meet Harry Arroyo, who was the IBF lightweight champion. And, I BS'd with him, and it was fun, and I started boxing, and I fell in love with it,
And it's so funny, throughout your career, you're always associated with Youngstown. You had that persona of a humble guy from a small town. You think that ultimately helped or hurt?
Yeah, both. Especially now in Youngstown, it's not a thriving city, and it's an economically depressed area, and but it is what it is. But yeah, growing up, but you had a lot of talent in Youngstown also. Just not in boxing. You got football players. I think we made the number one for per capita of a city, that puts out pro athletes and football players.
And, you had an amateur career in the 90s, a great amateur career, and you turned pro in 2000, worked your way up the ranks, and in 2007, you got the Edison Miranda fight. How big was that fight? Did you know you were headed for a title shot should you win that fight?
Yeah, but what's funny about that is it was actually supposed to be the Jose Luis Artusi fight before that. That was supposed to be the number one mandatory fight. And, if you go back and watch the fight, even after they put the medal around my neck, the WBC medal, and which is, number one mandatory challenger. And then they turn back around like 2 weeks later, and I get the call that I got to fight Edison Miranda. And I'm like, shit, not only am I not getting a real title fight, but you're putting me in against this crazy guy. And, that was a big fight, though. That opened up, obviously, the world title. And I think beating Miranda the way I did was really made me an attractive person to watch in that weight class.
And how big was the preparation for that fight? Obviously, it was, to that point, the biggest fight of your career. Was it different going into that fight?
Oh, yeah. And Miranda was so cocky. He knew that he was a badass. And he was looking past me, too. He was looking at Jermain Taylor. For me, I knew that I was going into a war with a guy that could hit hard, but I was confident in my power, in my conditioning, and in my chin, And that fight mainly came down to he's going to see how hard I could hit, I know I'm going to walk into some shots, and, I got my bulletproof vest on, but is his armor as strong as mine? That was the key in that fight.
How much did your life change after that fight? You burst onto the scene, you became a famous fighter at that point. How much was life different?
Oh, it was, a blink of an eye. They say, it changes quick overnight. Overnight's an understatement, but it changed. You're in the eye, you're in the public, under the microscope. It's a difference.
And so because of that fight in 2007, you get your title shot at Jermain Taylor. You knock him out in round 7. Can you describe what was it like at that moment when you finally realized you were champion of the world after all those years?
Man, and that's a good question, because it was a long career. Even before I got the title shot, a lot of guys, especially with a record like mine and everything else, they got title shots earlier. Taylor, I understand he came out and he had a bronze medal, but he got his title shot in 2005, and I turned pro before he did, obviously, because he had the Olympics. But, to go 7 years and stay undefeated it's hard. I don't care how good you are. I mean, things happen in professional boxing, especially early on, and it started becoming like demanding, really. To make sure you not only did you have to stay undefeated, but you had to perform well, because if you weren't getting closer to a title shot by knocking somebody out, you definitely weren't going to get closer by not knocking somebody out. You know what I mean? And so it was a constant pressure on me to go out there and perform well and beat guys and knock them out. And I did. That's the thing, that was kind of frustrating also was you see a lot of guys, even the world champions, fight guys that they're supposed to dominate, and they go in there and they do what they got to do to win. I was in there destroying my guys. I'm talking about even Miranda's and Zartucci's and Taylor in the first fight. It was just one of them type things, 7 years, that's a long time, to go undefeated and not have a title shot. But it was well worth it that night after beating Taylor, and especially the way the fight turned out. For the first couple of years after the fight, I wasn't happy about getting knocked out or knocked down in the second round. But now in 2018, you think back on it, that knockdown is what made that fight the number 9 of the decade, fight of the year, number 9 fight of the year of the decade. And it was just amazing. It was a hell of a rush, and it was well worth it too. So
why do you think it took so long for you to get that title shot?
I don't know. I think I have an idea, but I don't, mention it. I learned in media, you don't say certain things, but I really don't have an exact reason. I don't know if they have faith in guys from the Midwest that much. I don't know.
But prior to your retirement, you were set to fight Andre Ward. That fight ultimately fell through. Do you think that fight, perhaps a win in that fight, would have kept you active a bit longer?
Oh, definitely. I was absolutely stoked for that fight. It was kind of like what I needed. That 2012, I ended up going over to Robert Garcia, and it was great. It was awesome. At that point, you kind of go when you have to up and leave. Usually, a fighter leaves town at the beginning of his career. When you don't have a family, when he's looking to become a world champion and everything. For me, I was already over 12 years pro, and had 3 world titles, made money, had money, have money, and it's like then all of a sudden, with 2 kids at home and a wife, and then you got to up and leave and go all the way across country. And I fought Aaron Jaco, and that was cool because that was my first fight with Robert Garcia, and they wanted to get me used to the system and his way. And then the second fight, I fought Scott Sigmund, and then the third fight of Will Brzezinski. So I was kind of at that point like, wow, like I need to fight somebody, and I was learning though. And that was the thing, Robert Garcia. I thought I knew everything, I thought like, what are you going to teach me? I'm a 3-time world champion, this, that, but you learn, you never stop learning. And, but I really got pumped up for the Andre Ward fight. And then obviously he got injured. And at that time, there was no meaningful fights out there. There was nobody, not a prospect, not a former champion. There was no big fights. So I kind of started losing a little bit, and it was time to hang him up.
And so is that why you ultimately hung up the gloves, just because there was nobody out there that kind of got your juices going?
Yeah, and I was just, like I said, I was over. I didn't want to be a guard. And my kids were young. Every time I left to go back to California after a fight, they really had a hard time with that. And again, people can say what they want to say. I mean, guys retire after 6-7 years. So some guys retire after 10. Some will go on to have a 30-year, 20-year career. For me, it would be selfish for me at that point with 2 young kids. I don't need the money. I have my world title belts. I accomplished my dream. 12 years is a long time. I mean, you watch baseball and you see a guy, they say he's a 10-year vet. That's a long time. They start losing a little bit at that age. I just didn't have it to keep leaving them, and it just, and there was no big fight out there to really get motivated about. And in boxing, when you lose it a little bit, that's not a good thing. That's not a hobby that you keep doing, especially with boxing. And there was all these rats, and there's these rumors, and it's frustrating, and it's but it is what it is. But why I retired, and again, like I said, I think people just mainly remember that I think that my career started when I won the world title. They don't remember that I started at 9 years old. They don't remember I turned pro in 2000. So I was already 12-year, pro fighter. So I had 42 fights. That's a good amount of fights also.
And how much of your decision to retire was based on all these studies about head trauma, CTE, all these health-related injuries that could really limit your life going forward?
Oh, that was one of the big ones. I mean, even I told my wife at the time that I was going to retire at 30. And, of course, when I was 29, I was like, oh, probably 31, 32. But like I said, it just hit me, where I just didn't, I love boxing, but I just didn't have it. And I think, being away from the kids was a big part of it. And I was just watching the news the other day, and they were talking about the dangers of the head traumas and with Alzheimer's now, and they can't even find out until after you're dead. They do the studies. And I see guys who I'm close with, from Youngstown in their mid-50s, and they're already with all the symptoms of the health problems that come with too much head trauma. And, to me, like, I didn't get beat up real bad in my career, like a Gotti or some of these guys. And then I felt that I was going out pretty sharp still, and I want to stay sharp. But like I said, I got 2 kids. There's a lot more in life to do. I could get back to the sport of boxing by training guys, which I plan on doing here in the next couple of months. I have a a weightlifting gym I own. I had a plaza that I own. So, my money's invested. Everything's good. It would be really selfish for me to keep doing a sport like that. I don't need the money. I don't, I have the belts, like I said. And why take the chance of ruining my future for it? When you sign a contract, you're not signing it to please everybody else. The main thing that people forget, like with an athlete goes in and yes, we love our fans. The fans help a lot. I mean, so that's like one of the biggest things in your career. And you want to accomplish your goal. You want to be the best at what you do. And you obviously want to make a lot of money doing it. And that's pretty much it, but you're not signing it like, well, I can't retire because I'll make, these people mad if I retire. I'll go out there and put my health on the line and everything else in one of the most brutal sports because I want to keep them happy. I don't want them saying mean things about them. You don't sign a contract for that. Does a lot of that shit come with it? Yes, it does. But at the same time, like, your goal when you sign a contract and you turn pro is to accomplish your dream, which is making millions and winning a world title and being the best at your sport. And I accomplished that.
And you mentioned in an interview your 2 biggest regrets in life were the losses to Hopkins and Martinez. Looking back, do you wish you would have maybe called off those fights while you recovered from the injuries from which you were suffering at the time? No,
I couldn't. I couldn't do that. I'm not. I'm not trying to be. What do you call it? The whiner. I didn't do it, especially in my career, because I would have been the guy who's making excuses. But there's just a lot of shit that people have to go back and look into. The Hopkins fight, well documented, with the bronchitis and everything. I actually, small world, Robert Garcia was training Stephen Lewevino, and he was a co-main event, and we had to put my medicine in Stephen Lewevino's name so the Hopkins camp didn't find out, that I was sick. And then we didn't spar much in that camp. But coming off all the Paul Williams stuff with the staph infection, or the first fight, I think it was. I can't remember. I was supposed to fight Williams twice, but anyways, one got canceled. And that's how the Hopkins fight came about, because there was really nobody to fight. So I jumped up 2 weight classes to fight a named fighter, especially coming off fighting Gary Lockett, and I was hot. At that time, you can't keep fighting Gary Lockett either, because then people start coming down on you. And I guess, I was more concerned about the public as much as my career, satisfying people. And so if I would have, after the Paul Williams situation where people said I was ducking, a welterweight coming up to middleweight, and so I said, what, I'll show everybody. I'll jump 2 weight classes and fight a legend. And so I did that. Now, if I would have postponed that fight or pulled out of that fight, it would have been, my God, what would have came down on me for that? You know what I mean? So it was kind of a position where all the young selling people already bought tickets. I can't postpone this fight or cancel it. So that's why we stuck with the Hopkins fight and didn't do that. It was almost like the lashing that I would have got would have been worse than the loss or the reputation, whatnot. So, and then, the Martinez one, I think I should, there was a lot of things I could have done with that fight. To weigh in, I could have just came in 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds, which would have made a world of difference, heavy, and say, you know what, strip me of the belts and find me, because this is my last fight at middleweight anyways. So if you take the belts, it ain't going to hurt me. I think that could have been a situation there. There wasn't much we could do about that. Being 28 years old, 28 years old, and 6'2", it was just kind of hard to make 160. But it is what it is, and there's nothing you could do from that. I don't think it put a dent in my career. To lose to two future Hall of Famers. So, but I think people seen in the Martinez fight where the weight issue came in, trying to make weight. I wasn't tired lung-wise, cardio-wise, but it was just the muscle fatigue. I hit a wall in that 9th round, and I was up on the scorecards going into that round. The cut wouldn't have been as bad if I wasn't as dehydrated and didn't rehydrate as much as I did. So the cut really didn't have anything to do with it.
And now last year, there were rumors of you coming back, fighting Triple G. Was there any truth to those rumors? Do you have any desire to get back?
No, no. You know what? It's actually, sometimes I was talking with my lifting weight, my trainer guy, buddy, and we were like, dude, how much we can just keep screwing with people by showing videos of us training and saying we're coming back? Because, dude, no matter what I do, there's just rumors, and it goes and goes, and we thought it would be funny. And no, I get the itch here and there, but again, it's not worth it. I don't have to. I don't need to. And for what? To come back? I'm 35. I've been out for 5 years, over 5 years now. I mean, when you're a 22-year-old kid and you take a 2-year layoff at a high level, sometimes it's hard to recapture what you missed. And it's true. That's a very true statement. Let alone being 35 years old. And again, for what? I moved on, like I said, these different investments, and then I want to open a boxing gym, which I'm planning on doing, spring, summertime, and train fighters, move on and go into another chapter in the boxing game.
And you also mentioned that these days the middleweight division isn't as big physically as it was when you competed. How do you think it would have done against the Triple Gs, the Canelos, other middleweights at the top of the ranks today?
Well, again, and I got to watch how I say that, because I just explained my situation with Martinez, but I really do, because I do sound like a jackass too, though, because I lost to a smaller guy coming up to middleweight, Martinez. But again, without that being said, that Martinez fight was in 2008 or 2009. It's a big difference in that fight, and totally different. But yeah, these guys they're not big middleweights. Even Triple G, I mean, he's a natural middleweight. He's one of the very few, but he's not a real big guy. Jermain Taylor was 6'2" and put together. I was 6'2", big. Edison Miranda was 5'11", and a big middleweight. The guys, Arthur Abraham was shorter, but he was just a big, strong, stout guy who could hit. There's a lot right now. There's not many. Canelo's a fantastic boxer. Don't get me wrong, and I think that out of like a 154, he'd be dominant. Today or back when I was fighting, or of any era at 154, I think a guy like Canelo would be in contention. But the middleweight, there's not many there right now, and the fights like with Canelo, because he's a big name, it still attracts at middleweight. You got Charlo coming up. He's coming up from junior middleweight, and still really wasn't proven at that weight class, I don't think. There was no real test for him. And, Danny Jacobs, he's a big guy. He's a natural middleweight, but nobody really knew or seen much of Danny Jacobs either before that Triple G fight. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of, there's not much there to really talk about, though. And it's not their fault. It's not none of the fighters' faults. It's just the timing of that division.
Generally speaking, and I know you only retired recently, relatively speaking, when you look back at the landscape now, how's boxing changed since 10, 11 years ago when you were at the top of your game?
It has. It definitely has become, a lot more political, business-wise. But on the flip side of it, I think 2017 was one of the best years in boxing in a long time, maybe up there all time. I mean, it really has. It was. It did great numbers. The matchups that were made were fantastic, and I hope 2018 kind of keeps doing the same thing. So it has changed there for a little while, but there were just some very good fights this last past year, and I was excited. And then hopefully, like I said, 2018 kind of does the same thing.
What'd you think of the Mayweather-McGregor fight?
I kind of called that fight. I know Mayweather. He played a little bit, but another thing in that fight too, if you want to call it a fight, Mayweather looked like he was off for 270 some days, and like he was 40 years old. I mean, he was still Mayweather, but he just looked at it. Everybody's like, well, that's because McGregor's awkward. And I said, even when McGregor wasn't moving, and Floyd would throw a right hand, you could just see the ring rust on him. And for him to be going there, if I was a bet man, I would lay down right now that Conor McGregor was 25 pounds easily heavier than Mayweather the night of the fight. I mean, his one leg looked the size of both of Mayweather's, and Floyd was still able to go in there and do what he did. After over 2 years off and 40 years old to a young combat fighter. So I don't think that looked good on McGregor's part, or for the sport of MMA. But I don't want to see too much more of that. So.
Now, last year you launched a podcast named Kelly Pavlik's Punchline. Can you tell us a bit about that? Why you decided to jump into podcasting?
Yeah, it's Punchline with Kelly Pavlik and my co-host James Dominguez. And, the idea was brought up. We were screwing around on social media, Facebook, and he has a lot of friends, and I have a lot of friends on the Facebook, and a lot of people jumped at it. I mean, it was big, and I never really got along in the media field, but I said, screw it, let it be my turn to sit back and do what they do. And, it actually became, pretty fun, to be able to talk boxing, and we kind of break it up a little bit. I mean, we say what we want, and I say what I want within range. And, it's going actually pretty good. It's hard. It's usually a year type thing to really get moving in it. But it's taken off. We got a good amount of followers, and I just think it's something different. I like to stay involved, and it keeps me busier than I already am.
And it doesn't seem like you mind being on the mic. Is there a reason you never pursued a career in commentary or play-by-play or something of that nature?
Oh, I like it. I like being able to share. Boxing is what I've done and what I've known. You know what I mean? And I like to share the knowledge. My insights on the show. I mean, that's one thing that we mentioned. Me and my co-host has been right pretty much 99% of the time on things. So it's fun. And I think what my co-host, he's more of a boxing historian, and I'm more of the guy that like really knows behind the scenes. And I think it's a great combo too. So that's another reasons, to do it. So, I mean, sometimes my co-hosts will bring up guys and their belts and everything else who I've never paid attention to or heard of, or maybe seen a fight that I didn't see, and he can talk about it, and then I have something to feed off of, and what the kid could do and what he needs to do.
And on the topic of secondary careers, you mentioned earlier you're going to jump into training. Why are you deciding to go that route? Is it something that you have a real passion for?
Yeah. Again, it's the sport that I've done and known. I've also studied it, as I was doing it. I just bought a weightlifting gym, but like an overall fitness gym. And, I'm very knowledgeable on how to get the body ready. If you want to go for bulk, if you want to go to get trimmed, if you're an athlete, so that's the kind of stuff that I'm into. And boxing, I would like to add that part of it with training of the fighters, certain styles, everything, the whole 9 yards with boxing.
Right. We mentioned at the top of the show how you're from a small town. There were some incidents you were involved in over the years. How tough is it to have been under that spotlight where an ordinary person going through all those things would have, had their life not impacted virtually whatsoever?
Well, that's, and it's a good question. And funny you mentioned that because you hit it right on the head. But a lot of these things, first of all, there's always one side to it. And I don't know if you even ever noticed in all of them, it was just the media, and maybe like one time you may have seen a comment from me, but the rest of the time it was, I was quiet, and I never really got my side, and never really got in trouble for any of these because they knew that I wasn't, that I was not guilty of it. But even that fact being said, guilty of it. If this was anybody else, now you're an attorney too, so you would know, but half the things, everything I've done, first of all, there wouldn't even have been a cop or anybody called to that situation or anybody being arrested, let alone the media attention it garnered. You know what I mean? And it's just they had it out, and it goes back. But like I said, it's not the 80s and 70s when Youngstown was a striving, big industrial town, and it was producing jobs and putting out, and it was a great place. It's a depressed, miserable area. And if you look at our local media, they don't put anything positive. Like I said before, we're notorious for NFL players and everything else, but you do not see that in the paper. You might get a little clip saying they started, but God forbid one little bad thing happens, they're front lines. And I understand negativity sells. But these guys, they hold charity events and everything else, and you don't see anything about that, no media attention. I've done numerous, which I never wanted media there, but I've still, to this day, I've done, I can't tell you, maybe minimum 4 to 5 charitable events, and personally myself, and, it's not brought up. But, and again, I don't want it, but usually word gets around in Youngstown. And, it's a shame, to be honest with you. You go back, and if you really look at the incidents, without me even having to give my side, you would say, like, dude, nobody would ever got in trouble for this, let alone it being, news. So there's a lot of things that happen, especially in the boxing world with people, and that's easily forgotten, forgiven. And, I haven't done anything too bad, but it's a small town, and word gets around quickly. And everything that was hit in the big media, as far as TMZ and boxing pages and everything else, was directly from the local media here in Youngstown. So, and it's frustrating, it truly is. This last incident with the BB gun, and such BS and baloney that I really do. I mean, there's not much I could say on it. I had witnesses, reliable sources of witnesses at my house The kid stayed at my house for 2 days after because I wasn't assaulting him. I cooked for him. He brought his kids and his family over, and because he couldn't go home, and I fed his kids, and I was paying him good because he didn't have money, to do work in my backyard. And then, like I said, then all of a sudden he got in trouble. He had a warrant out for his arrest, which I didn't know about. Didn't know one thing about it because I wasn't like buddy with him, And I was just helping him out, feeling bad. Here, 2 days after this happened, after this BB gun incident, as he was staying at my house, his uncle comes there who works for the sheriff's department, and he goes, "Is Brian here?" And I say, "Well, he was here." I go, I don't see him. He goes, "Hey, Kelly," he's like, "I'm just letting you know, he has a warrant out for his arrest, and if he's here, and you could get in trouble for that." And I said, "All right." So like an hour goes by, I see him, and I say, "Brian, you got to get the hell out of here, man." I was like, "You didn't tell me any of this shit." I was like, "I don't know why you would come here at my house." I go, they love my ass. They get in trouble. I go, "Get out." And he ended up not leaving. I had a big house, and he went and hid another side of the house. Finally, I called his uncle back. I said, "Hey, he's here. Come get him." And he got arrested. He did 2 months in the county jail, got out, took his orange jumpsuit off, and walked over to the sheriff's department and pressed charges against me. And we're like, if anywhere else a detective would say, "You know what, he's not a reliable source. He just got out of jail. He has a record of being a derelict." He's 41 years old at the time. He's 43, 44 now. And but he was able to go ahead and do that because it's Youngstown, and they seen it as a great idea. I told my attorney numerously that, and my attorney knew, again, from the witnesses, and even his own girlfriend testified on behalf of me, like, dude, he stayed at Kelly's house for 2 days. I had Facebook screenshots of him posting and joking about the BB gun incident, like, "Oh, we got a joke," like laughing about it. And it turned into what it was, Something that, so like what I'm going on, something as easy as that, simple as that, and it got turned into that. And you go back to the what was it, the taxi cab. I left the money on the back seat for a guy who he in the paper stated that it took him 30 minutes when it was only a 12, 15-minute drive. The kid didn't show up in court because he was in rehab. The taxi cab. Now this is Youngstown too. This is your taxi cab drivers. And I stated to my attorney, I said, I left the money on the back seat for him. He's like, but I left 25, not 35, because it shouldn't have been that much, and it shouldn't have took me a half hour. And he said that I never left any money, nothing at all. But that was something that could have been beat, and that was also something that would have never hit media, and probably not even a cop culture, because that cab company, I didn't know it, but had a reputation already. And again, just these small things like that. If you really break them down, they're petty. An ATV on my street, with an ATV, they're little things like that, and they get blown up.
I always say these days it is tough to be a celebrity in this climate.
It is.
With social media. It's tough.
The Foo Fighters concert, it was my best friend who actually just over my house yesterday. We were doing like a mosh pit type thing, and bounced around. We just came out of the Foo Fighters. They said I was intoxicated. So I came from a charity event. That concert was at 12 o'clock in a plaza in Warren, Dave Grohl's hometown. And backstage, they didn't have no alcohol. They don't serve alcohol in a CD store. So, of course, that was what was thrown into it. And they sent me to court 5 times for that because they didn't know what they wanted to charge me with. Literally came out and told me because the cop, he couldn't get me with disorderly conduct because in the original police statement, it stated I was cooperative. And my buddy asked him when I was in the car, asked the cop, he goes, well, if you're arresting him, why didn't you arrest me if we were fighting? It didn't make sense. And it's, but again, is it stupid? Yeah, I guess can you fall back on it and say it's stupid of me? Yeah. But everybody, again, I feel like that little kid that says, well, everybody else does it. Everybody else does a lot worse. Why am I getting in trouble? And it is frustrating, though. It truly is. You get older, though, you got to, I guess, some of the kid shit could go, come to an end.
Where could people go to find out more about you, what you're up to these days, how to contact you if needed?
Right now, to check into the podcast show, you could just type in punchline.live, and it'll pull up our website and all of our old shows and upcoming. You can find us on YouTube at The Punchline with Kelly Pavlik and James Dominguez. And everything else will be coming out more, too. So,
Kelly, once again, thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, man. I appreciate you doing the interview.
And that's our interview with Kelly Pavlik. I hope you had a good time. Thanks so much for listening. My name's Dmitriy Shakhnevich. If you want to learn more about me, please visit www.dshacklaw.com. And this is the Fight Lawyer Podcast. Till next time, folks.